Good morning, everybody. I'm Emer Callahan from Tourism Northern Ireland, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this briefing session ahead of our second virtual Meet the Buyer, which is happening next week. So I am delighted to welcome you to this morning's briefing session, and here's our agenda for this morning. So there'll be a quick welcome from myself, and then I'm going to hand over to our good friend Julie O'Brien from Runda, who is going to take us through the briefing session for this morning. We will then have a question and answer session, and we're looking at the session lasting approximately 1 hour. So if you have any questions during the session, please pop them into the question and answer function, and we will come to them at the end. For the question and answer session, we will hand over to Michelle Connolly from Profile Tree to facilitate, and we'll be joined by my colleague Dawn Corrigan, who many of you will know from the Meet the Buyer setup and all the communications to date. So I encourage you to make full use of the session. It's been designed specially with you in mind. So ask plenty of questions and to make sure you're getting the most out of the Meet the Buyer session next week. So let's get started. So as I said, I'm the Business Solutions Manager here at Tourism Northern Ireland, and you'll see on screen the names of my fantastic colleagues. And our remit really is to connect you, the Northern Ireland industry, with overseas buyers. And we mainly focus on group leisure and then also the MICE side of the house. That's the meetings, incentives, conference and events. So we've Gwen, Connor, Dawn, Aoife, Heather, Gillian and Joanne are all in our team. So our approach for the year ahead is very much focused on creating opportunities for you, our Northern Ireland industry, to do business with overseas buyers, be that a group leisure, in golf, in the luxury space, or in the MICE section as well. So we've now moved from our very traditional, tried and tested face-to-face formats to fully virtual platforms. But the main focus is still the same, to keep you front of mind with buyers for when the market does return. We've had a very busy autumn and spring programme, creating over 800 individual opportunities for Northern Ireland tourism businesses to connect with overseas operators. And we are now coming to the end of our virtual spring programme, which kicked off in January with our first ever Meet the Industry event, which I know many of you attended. We then had a super workshop with the members of the Incoming Tour Operators Association of Ireland. And then we had a range of other events such as the North American Expo, Northern European Workshop and the first ever CNIT Northern Ireland Forum, amongst others. So just the next slide there, Julie. Today, however, is all about Meet the Buyer, and next week sees our second ever virtual Meet the Buyer take place. This is our flagship B2B event that we deliver in partnership with our colleagues in Tourism Ireland. And it will see 183 representatives from our industry meet with 156 international operators from 16 global markets. And to date, over 3,000 sales appointments are scheduled to take place next week. So it's an amazing opportunity. So it's one of our largest ever Meet the Buyers. I think it is the biggest to date, which really demonstrates the keen interest in Northern Ireland for when the market returns, which is hugely encouraging. So where are we now with 1 week to go? So hopefully you've all registered on the Converve platform and you're hopefully seeing appointments coming through. So the schedule is now live. You've 3 days to accept or decline appointments. So please react quickly to any invitations that come through. Please continue to make appointments as well with operators to make full use of the opportunity and to build out your schedule. And we've also lifted the cap on the number of appointments that can be made to facilitate more engagement. You will also have received your industry briefing document from Dawn, which gives you more detail on the Converve platform, how to make appointments, and it also gives you details around frequently asked questions with regards to the Converve platform. So please do take time to read through this in detail to save any issues closer to the time. So I know for some of you, this is your first time using the Converve platform. So here are some top tips to make sure that you don't get afraid by any of the technology. The main thing is the browser. Chrome is the recommended browser for use with Convert, so please try to use Chrome as your browser. Check all your microphone and your camera settings in advance and test everything in advance. Use the Start Video Meeting button to practice your technique. Don't leave it until 1 minute before your appointment is about to start, because that's when Dawn then gets panicked phone calls, and we're trying to then react quickly to help you get online. If you're sharing a screen for your presentation, if you can share the application window or the Chrome tab, depending on your setup. Do not share the entire screen. But whenever you go through that to test that in advance, that will become clear. But don't worry, help is at hand. We're on hand through the contact help desk, or also in one of the virtual lounges. And there's 2 virtual lounges, one for requesting assistance and another one then to network informally with other delegates if you have any downtime. So don't worry, we are on hand to help with any queries. Okay, so in terms of the actual platform and the actual format of Meet the Buyer, so we rigorously evaluate all our platforms post-event to ensure that they're delivering both for you, our industry partners, and for our overseas buyers. So from last year's virtual events, here are some key statistics from the Northern Ireland industry who attended. So 91% found operators were genuinely interested in doing business, which is really positive. 97% said the virtual Meet the Buyer exceeded their expectations, and 79% rated the event as excellent, and 92% of you said you'd be very likely to attend the event in 2021, which is fantastic. And also from the operator side of the house, their top 3 objectives for attending this event next week is 96% was to meet new suppliers and learn about new experiences. So that's where you come in, so that these people are very keen and willing to learn. 93% wanted to learn more about Northern Ireland as a destination, and 75% of them were looking to extend existing programs or create new programs. So very clear intentions there about wanting to learn more and wanting to do business with you. So in terms of some support resources that we've developed to make sure you're getting the most out of Meet the Buyer, we've designed a range of tools. Julie, if you just hit the next slide there, that'd be great. So first thing for you to really have a good look at is the Tourism Northern Ireland content pool, and that's where you'll find lots of footage, photography that you can use in your presentations to sit alongside, say, images of your own businesses as well. We also have our Discover Northern Ireland YouTube channel, and you can link to any of the videos there in any of your follow-ups if you want to provide some inspiration or show some of the areas that you've been talking about. On tourismireland.com, there are market profiles for you to go in and learn more about the US market, the Canadian market, the German market, for example. They're all there. And we also have lots of research and insights on tourismni.com, and they're particularly relevant now in the COVID situation, where we are constantly tracking consumer sentiment in market. There's also a great page there with links to all the previous webinars that have been delivered by our colleagues in Tourism Northern Ireland, and there's some of them there that are absolutely excellent, and I would advise you to sit down and have a listen to some of them and pick up some tips. And if you want to stay up to date with ourselves, you can sign up to our social media easing, and that keeps you up to date with all further opportunities coming up with regards to international markets. There's our industry briefing pack, which Dawn would have issued. So that has all your details in there about Converve. And we've also developed a range of social media assets for you to use on social media. Julie, if you just hit the next slide there, please, hopefully she'll pop up. There's our social media assets there. So these are for use on Twitter or your LinkedIn profile, or also adding to your email signature to say that you're attending Meet the Buyer and you're encouraging operators to meet you. So these are great for starting conversation, and we'll be sending out a link to those tomorrow. They're currently on our Tourism Northern Ireland content pool, so you can just go in there, search for Meet the Buyer, and then you'll be able to download the assets. And also during the actual event, we want to create the buzz of us all being in the room together. So you can join the conversation through social media by using hashtag Meet the Buyer. And that's our Twitter handle there at NI Tourist Board, and on LinkedIn, we're at Tourism Northern Ireland. So now I'm going to hand over to our good friend Julie O'Brien from Runda, who's going to take us through this morning's session, making sure we're all going to be fantastic experts and really well prepared for Meet the Buyer next week. So Julie, over to you then.
Oh, thank you so much, Emer. And I'll tell you, I was just making notes as you were speaking there, and it's really worth pointing out that feedback from buyers that 96% of buyers are looking to meet new businesses to bring to their customers and markets, and 75% are looking for ideas that they can incorporate in extended programs. So it's wonderful to have that feedback direct from buyers, making us aware of the opportunity that's available through buyers and the really important Meet the Buyer event. So as Emer said there, my name is Julie O'Brien. I worked for a long time as a buyer myself. I've also worked within tourism businesses, so I'm very interested in the Meet the Buyer event, and most importantly, winning opportunities that translates into economic benefits for your business, your community, and your destination. So with that in mind, let's move through today's session. I'll be with you for just under an hour, and as Emer said, we're all really looking forward to hearing some super questions that will allow for shared learnings at the end of this session. So what's the key content I'm going to cover? We're going to take a look at an overview of virtual Meet the Buyer 2021. Some of those points Emer's already touched on, including a preparatory timeline. I'm going to give you 4 top tips you need to know for a successful virtual Meet the Buyer. So I want you to have those in your head so that you can focus on conversions at this year's event. We're going to go through the steps of mastering the all-important verbal pitch via virtual Meet the Buyer to achieve conversions. So nailing that pitch, really honing and refining it to get conversions is an art that needs to be mastered for virtual Meet the Buyer. And before questions then, we'll take a look at the important function of following up with travel buyers to achieve conversions. So when we say conversions, we mean, of course, confirmed bookings, revenue generating bookings, and that's what we all want. So wherever you are, in your homes or in your office, let's kick off now. And with this first topic, preparing for virtual Meet the Buyer. So what is Meet the Buyer? And for those of you who are maybe new to the event this year, and what are the key dates, which hopefully you're already aware of? So what is Meet the Buyer? Well, it's Northern Ireland's largest travel trade event. As you heard from Emer, more than 155 buyers attending this year from 16 different global markets. So the buyers who attend Meet the Buyer are from international markets, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The focus of Meet the Buyer is leisure travel. Therefore, buyers that represent the leisure travel industry are prevalent. So these would include buyers like tour operators or DMCs, destination management companies, that do beautiful customized travel programs for their leisure customers to destinations like Northern Ireland. We also have travel wholesalers, a different kind of buyer. They tend to buy in, also doing customized programs, but they tend to be, buying in large volume and do a huge amount of travel programs around the world usually, and also of course in destinations like Northern Ireland. And then we have what we call OTAs, or online travel agents. So travel agents that are selling digitally to promote the services for their customers and markets around the world. So the kind of tourism products that they would like to bring to their customers around the world. So focus on leisure tourism, and you will see that diverse kind of travel buyers attend, and you need to be aware of these diverse kinds and which ones are a match for you. Meet the Buyer is always important. It's important every year, but bearing in mind, all that's happened, particularly in the last year, in light of COVID-19, Meet the Buyer 2021 is really crucial because it will be a really important, giant stepping stone for the recovery of Northern Ireland's tourism industry. So in the past years, when we were talking about Meet the Buyer, we would have said, you need to step up and do an amazing job. It is even more important that you raise the bar this year to, accelerate the recovery, the potential for this recovery for Northern Ireland and opportunities for the destination. It is really important to know that in leisure tourism, contracting tends always, irrespective of COVID-19, to take place 1 year in advance. So contracting for 2022, next year, would naturally happen in 2021. That means you need to set yourself up via virtual Meet the Buyer to win opportunities now. So really crucial for the year we're in. So we're talking about the different kind of buyers that attend Meet the Buyer, but what about the trade? You know, who is representing Destination Northern Ireland? Well, there are diverse categories of tourism businesses attending, accommodation providers, all different kinds of accommodation providers, visitor attractions, activity providers, venues, restaurants and pubs, transport companies, anything from self-drive to chauffeur drive and coaching, and actually Irish travel buyers also attend virtual Meet the Buyer to nurture existing partnerships with global travel partners and also to find new partnerships. I want you to bear that in mind, that the Irish-based travel buyer could be attending virtual Meet the Buyer to meet a global buyer. I want you to keep that kind of partnership in mind, because we're going to talk about a little bit more about that later, and it has big implications for follow-up. So bear in mind, you, the trade representing Northern Ireland, you represent not only yourself and your business, you also represent your community, your destination, and Destination Northern Ireland as a whole. So it's really important that you put your best foot forward, because Northern Ireland will be competing against other destinations and destinations right around the world. So it is really important that you do a good job of representing you and Destination Northern Ireland well. So key dates for virtual Meet the Buyer, well, you should be well familiar with those. As Emer said, you know, the clock is ticking, it's only a week away. So beginning Tuesday, the 20th of April, Wednesday, 21st of April, and wrapping up on Thursday, the 22nd of April. So as you know, because hopefully you're already actively seeking and accepting appointments, the appointment system was open for buyers and suppliers to make appointments from the 30th of March. Bear in mind that you will be able to make appointments right up until the last day of virtual Meet the Buyer on the 22nd of April. In my own past, though, when I was requesting appointments, I like to kind of get in early to avoid disappointment, to avoid missing an important opportunity. So I would urge you, you know, to be really focusing on trying to get the appointments with the buyers you want now. Do be aware that if an appointment request is made by a buyer and you do not reply within 3 days, that appointment will auto delete. So you do need to keep on top of the appointments. And I know in my past, I'd have been checking in with that system every day to maximize the opportunity via virtual Meet the Buyer. The system will remain live for 12 months, so all of those contacts will be in the system, but very helpfully, Tourism Northern Ireland have been working on producing a PDF workshop manual, which contains all of the delegates' contact details, and that will be issued to you the day before the event. So you'll have all the leads in one place, super useful tool, so watch out for that. In terms of the appointments themselves, as you've just heard this morning, this year there is no limit on appointment requests. So you can make as many appointments as you wish. But I want you to take care with those appointment requests, because the job at MEHL is to establish appointments, you know, to really research appointments with buyers who you feel have the potential to work in a close partnership with you. So bear that in mind, and we'll talk about that further in a moment. For the days of virtual Meet the Buyer from Tuesday, the 20th of April to Thursday, the 22nd of April, the appointments will be open between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And of course, bear in mind that at Meet the Buyer, we're meeting international travel buyers who might be working on different time zones. So this time span from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Will also facilitate them. Each appointment will last 15 minutes. And if you've got a back-to-back appointment, you need to know that you'll have 5 minutes to get your house in order before you go on to do a good job, an excellent job at your next appointment. So 15 minutes per appointment and 5 minutes between back-to-back appointments. So bear that in mind. Your job at virtual Meet the Buyer is to maximize the match potential. Keep that word in your head in big capital letters, match. We are looking for matches. So let's look now at a preparatory timeline for virtual Meet the Buyer. Well, our priority level 1, that one should be box tick. You should have already done it. Make sure your profile is excellent. And, you know, from the 30th of March, from that moment on, you've been looking at creating appointments and researching best match buyer profiles. Priority level 2 is about managing those buyer appointments and maximizing matches. So this is really important that you're researching buyer profiles, really trying to figure out if this buyer is a match for the kind of product or service that you offer. So think about it like a game of Snap. You are trying to research buyers really well to maximize those matches. And as I'm saying that, a voice is coming into my head where I remember somebody who attended, Meet the Buyer 1 year said, I feel I got my matches about 60% right. They were new, first time going. The second year, they were like, I'm going to aim to get that number closer to 90 or 100%. So maximizing matches puts yourself in the best position to achieve conversions. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Priority level 3, preparing to maximize outcomes via virtual Meet the Buyer. Really important. And how do we do that? We do that by managing the technology. So we know how to screen share, for example, and we know it by really practicing our verbal pitch. And we're going to go through that language now in a moment. So you have the hooks for conducting your verbal conversation. And finally, very important in terms of our preparatory timeline, that we know how to follow up, how to create follow-up content. And we're going to go through that now in a moment as well. So let's take a look now at our 4 top tips that we need to know for a successful virtual Meet the Buyer 2021. So if you are new to this event, what were the first 4 things that I would say to you? Well, the first thing is that it is all about matching. So we've spoken about that, and we'll go into that now in a moment. The second thing is that you must know how to play your role. The third thing is you must be aware that the power is with you. You reflect everything. And the fourth thing, really important point, is you must know how to share the essence of your offering. This is really important. Okay, so the first thing, virtual Meet the Buyer is all about matching. It's all about establishing a connection and establishing if there is a match. So the buyer who you'll be speaking about, and you heard 96% of them are looking to find out information about new businesses. What are they doing via virtual Meet the Buyer? They are looking for the business that represents the right match for their customers' needs and nuances and for their markets. So we're talking about establishing a connection with the buyer and establishing if there is a match. So you will notice then the Meet the Buyer appointment system Converve is all about matching. You do a really great profile. You take the time to research your buyers, and even the system itself suggests matches for you. Here we got a functionality, show only my match. So we are talking about connecting businesses like yours with buyers who are the right match for your business. The buyer is looking for a match, and you as a supplier should be looking for the right match too. So when we're at Meet the Buyer, our job is to glean those matches, to research them in advance, to establish if there is an opportunity potentially to do business or not. The system has a wonderful messaging system that allows us to glean and do some, to create a connection before we ever meet the buyer at our virtual appointment. So let's just say it's today and you open Converve, the Meet the Buyer appointment system, and there's an appointment request from a particular buyer. Your job, I would say, is to reply back a message and to express delight. Begin the process of creating a connection with that buyer. Thank you so much. So I'm giving you a sample text there for requesting an appointment. I am really looking forward to telling you all about my business with incredible views overlooking wherever you're based. This is a beautiful part of Ireland. So immediately, I suppose to get the buyer to warm towards you, to get that connection going, we need to establish lots of little connections, lots of little communications. So using the messaging system to do that is really effective. Now, let's just say you had a buyer request for an appointment and you've read their profile and you're not exactly sure if they're the right match for you or not. You could use the messaging system to do a little bit of research. So for example, saying something like, thank you so much for your appointment request. Can I check something with you? Well, I see from your profile that you manage, and you note whatever you've read from their profile, our business is all about, and you know that. Can I ask thereby if what we offer is what you are looking for? So I can remember on this system, a chocolate company once writing a profile that seemed to attract a lot of younger student groups. But actually this particular chocolate was more designed for adults. So they used the messaging system to glean the kind of requests that were made by buyers. And, one or two of those buyers replied back, oh, yes, we are in education, but we're in postgraduate adult groups. So we are the right match for you. So you can use the messaging system to establish a connection, and also to do a little bit more research on the buyer profiles, and actually asking the question to establish if you are a match or otherwise. Bear in mind, this is a two-way street. The buyer is looking for a match, and the supplier is looking for a match too. The second tip I'd had for you is that you must know how to play your role. You must know that it is your job to seek matches, and you must know that it is your job to convert opportunities that arise via virtual Meet the Buyer. It is also your job to understand what this opportunity is. We already said there earlier the diverse kind of buyers that are available through Meet the Buyer, online travel agents, wholesalers, tour operators. So let's just say if we're engaging with a tour operator, well, I need to understand the kind of customers a tour operator has. So for example, an FIT, a fully independent traveler, little groups of 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7, 8, that the tour operator does a customized travel program for. Ad hoc groups, so groups with ad hoc requests, maybe a special interest group interested in adventure. So these are kind of random inquiries that might happen within the year, for the year, or within the year for next year that I would need to respond to. And then tour series, of course, which tend to work according to repeat dates, carefully crafted programs that individuals buy into so that they become part of a group. So do you see what I mean? This is a bit like playing a game. It's like knowing how to play tennis or hockey or football, whatever it is. Within this Meet the Buyer landscape, you need to know what your role within, as a team player is. So let's just say the buyer mentions to you something like FIT. You need to know how to respond to the question and know what that word means. So knowing the jargon is really important. And if you hear words that you haven't heard before via virtual Meet the Buyer, I would say make a quick note of them and quickly search their meaning so that you can engage in a conversation, learn the vocabulary that allows you to engage in the conversation in a two-way meaningful way. So for example, if the buyer says to you, do you do allocations? What they mean is they're asking, do you hold space, bedrooms or tickets, that I can, you can hold for me and I can sell to my clients without having to put a call into each time. So if the buyer asks a question like that, it would be important to understand the vocabulary. So you must know your role. Meet the Buyer is such an important opportunity. You must know your role within the Meet the Buyer landscape, understand your role, understand the influence and the conversions you can get for your business and your destination. Really important to understand that you reflect everything. So that's a really interesting thing to me. And as someone who's worked as a buyer, I've listened to lots of pitches by tourism businesses over the years. And it's been really interesting for me to note that you present really well. You present with a tone that I would say strikes a balance between being professional and friendly. You come prepared. You show your best self. You show that you are reliable and trustworthy. You know that your passion will inspire passion in the buyer, and the buyer will see if you do a good job, everyone who stands behind you, your team, your experience as being positive too. So you do a good job and you are seen as a reflection of everything. So know that as you present yourself, your business, your destination, that you're presenting, destination Northern Ireland, and that Ireland competes against global markets. And imagine the power knowing that if you do a good job, you reflect everything. You instill a desire in the buyer to want to engage with you and to want to come and visit your destination and destination Northern Ireland. It's really important to understand that you actually have the control over that. My last final tip, if I were to pick four, is really a crucial one, and it's the one I see where most errors are made when engaging with buyers. It is most important that you share the essence of your offering. So you heard from Emer this morning that each appointment is about 15 minutes long. So it is really important, that within that 15 minutes that you use the time really well to explain what your business is about, to explain what you have to sell, to establish a connection with the buyer, to encourage a two-way conversation. So I would say this: think about the difference between a pitch, and we'll go through the steps of a pitch in a moment, and a live experience. So at the live experience, let's just say I'm an activity provider or a visitor attraction. You've got an experience that lasts an hour and a half, or 2 hours. As a customer, I will have all of that time with you. There's lots of stuff you can say to me. There's lots of stuff that you can show me. The point of the pitch is very different though. In a pitch, you might have 5, 10, 15 minutes like you have with Meet the Buyer, but also with Meet the Buyer, you have other things to do, like allowing the buyer time to talk and to establish a connection. So the pitch is a distillation, keep that word in your mind, of what happens during the live experience. The pitch is a distillation. So I need to carefully craft my verbal pitch so I get the buyer to understand what my business is about and what kind of experiences that I have, or services that I have to sell. So the pitch is a distillation. If I go into too much detail, as if I had all the time of the live experience, I'm going to overwhelm the buyer, and they're not actually going to see my offering, and you will have damaged an opportunity for a conversion. So bear in mind the difference between the pitch and the live experience. So keeping that pitch in mind, we're going to talk now about mastering the verbal pitch via virtual Meet the Buyer to achieve a conversion. So as Emer said, and it's really important, and I, to be honest, probably don't like that idea that Dawn is getting calls the first morning, of Meet the Buyer with people, trying to figure out the technology. You go prepared to achieve conversions. So you practice that technology beforehand. As Emer explained, you can go into an appointment that's been already established for a particular day and time. You can press the start button. You can practice screen sharing, because the buyer will not have yet joined that appointment until your confirmed date. So there's really no excuses for, creating a panic for yourself the first day of the Meet the Buyer event. You can practice this well in advance so that you're arriving totally comfortable. Do take up Emer's tip about practicing the screen sharing, the images that you're going to show the buyer, so that you can make sure that you can present these in a really fluid way. Through the Converve, the Meet the Buyer appointment system, you've also placed advanced information, maybe like videos or images that you can also reference to the buyer. And I cannot say this word loudly enough. You must practice. The best practice you can do, the higher the opportunity for conversion that you are going to achieve. When we're dealing with pitches, what we try to do is take, the hitches out of the conversation. So I have a really important rule when I'm dealing in commercial landscapes, and that is clarity equals conversion. So I just don't like the buyer in any sense at any moment to be confused. So we would always fill in the gaps. So it is important to be aware that the name of the registered participant for virtual Meet the Buyer is visible to the travel buyer you will be having the conversation with. So let's just say the person registered is not you. One of your colleagues is doing the next presentation. I would say it's important to begin by clarifying that for the buyer, saying something like this. Hi, Carolina. My name is John Rafferty. I have been so looking forward to meeting you today. As you can see, my colleague Tracy Johnston was registered to meet with you. Tracy and I work really closely together, and I am delighted to have the pleasure of introducing you to our wonderful experiences today. And on you go. So we just, smooth that path for the buyer so that they're immediately in our arms. So let's take a look now at the verbal pitch, process. So, and we're going to practice, guys. We're going to make sure that this is in order. At the end of your appointment, the buyer must understand what your business offering is. They must understand the tourism experiences, product or services that you are selling. They must feel that your business is reliable and easy to work with. They will be leaning on you for your services, and they are not going to work with a business that is not reliable or trustworthy. And the buyer must understand if your business is the correct match for their customers and markets. So these are the key things we need to achieve through a well-honed verbal pitch. So let's take us through the steps now. So the first step, on we go to our appointment, and maybe I begin with a nice warm welcome. Remember, I reflect everything. I'm going to aim to establish here a connection with the buyer to bring them into my world. And do bear in mind, in the world we're living in, the stresses people are under, you could be speaking to a buyer who's talking to you from their apartment in Paris, or their garage in Stockholm. And be aware that from destination Northern Ireland, you have the opportunity to actually be a light in their day. So let's aim to have really meaningful, really kind-hearted conversations with these buyers so that we can establish the opportunity to work together. So a good warm welcome with a nice smile. Hello Carolina, my name is Mary, and I represent the Antrim Storytellers. I have been really looking forward to meeting you this morning. Bearing in mind that you may be speaking to a buyer that does not have English for their first language, slow down. Make sure that they're hearing the words that you are using. The next step is demonstrate your research. The buyer is interested in finding a match with you. You are interested in finding a match with the buyer. You must then, show the buyer that you have, taken an interest in exploring a bit about them. So you could say something like, I see from your profile that you cater for special interest soft adventure groups. Can I ask if you also cater for FITs? Showing the buyer I am interested in them. This is a partnership. The buyer is interested in meeting in the middle. I am interested in finding the buyer in the middle. So we need to establish this middle ground. Step 3, route the buyer, really important. So we don't just, speak as if the buyer already understands where we are from. We show them a map, we point to the map, we clarify our location. My name is Mary. I represent the Antrim Storytellers. We are so proud of our location in a beautiful rural village overlooking wherever in County Antrim, and to be part of the wonderful Embrace the Giant Spirit experience brand. And on a map, you show the buyer the location so that they can route in their head where you're from. And if you have a particular view that your business overlooks, something, a river or a mountain or, a garden, explain that to them too so that they can visualize it. Step 4, you create trust. Okay, so bearing in mind what I said there earlier, you reflect everything. Your business, your demeanor reflects your tourism business. And I can tell you, having worked as a buyer, that buyers very much look for integrity. They will be looking at your face, looking at the words you're using, looking at how you're engaging, and mentally assessing, is this business, is this person reliable? Are they going to let me or my customers or my markets down? Are they easy to work with? So bear this in mind. Creating trust is really important. So knowing you're in control of the narrative that you're delivering to the buyer, and they will be assessing, making a judgment, based on, the images you're using and your behavior and the words that you're using about your reliability and your trustworthiness. Number 5, set out your market stall. So let's just say I'm Jenny from, the really beautiful green holiday cottages. I might say, my name is Jenny Hannah, and I'll explain about the self-catering cottages that I have available. And then I'll move on. We also have experiences available here. We have, 5 of them. Let me explain to you today about, this one, engaging with, Mark Hannah on the craft of stone wall building. Okay, so maybe in my business, I have 15 experiences. but the buyer does not have time over a 15-minute appointment to hear about each one of those experiences. My job is to provide a distillation. So I would explain to the buyer, listen, I have 15, 20, 25 experiences, but today let me tell you about 2 of those, and it'll give you an insight into what we offer. The buyer may be interested in knowing the numbers that apply to each experience, and if those numbers are changing in light of COVID-19, you can explain that too. It is really important through the images and the words we use when we're engaging with the buyer that we use these to create a picture. So we carefully choose words that give a clear insight into the business offering, and the buyer should be able to clearly picture the experience without being there. So I call that mental images. There are words we can use, for example, a special spot where locals like to have a picnic overlooking a river. There are words that we can use that really enlighten and delight the buyer and almost make them feel like they're in the place without being there. And when we're delivering to the language the buyer, these are the kind of words we would like to hear being used, mental images that enlighten them, that motivate them, that almost make them feel, or in fact do make them feel like they want to get up from their seat and get on a plane right now to Northern Ireland to explore it. So us delivering this language can actually have that impact. We speak verbally at our verbal pitch, and we reference visual imagery. So the imagery can support our verbal pitch, really allowing the buyer to visualize the offering here. So as part of your preparation, you must carefully choose quality images that reinforce the verbal pitch. So this one is really important. And I might point out, as a buyer, when I've listened to pitches in my past, I've sometimes heard people say, an awful lot about the kind of clothes you need to wear or the duration of the experience. And that's not a mental image, that's more like the practicalities. And the practicalities can be issued to the buyer after the event. During virtual Meet the Buyer, you want to enlighten and delight and inspire that buyer. So place a focus on beautiful mental images that do enlighten them and images that enlighten that buyer too. Step 7, crucially important question, you must understand how the buyer contracts. Okay, so does the buyer contract directly with your business, or does the buyer contract via another travel partner? So I'm going to say how I would say that. Can I just ask, especially if I've established this buyer is potentially interested in working with me, can I ask you, do you contract directly with businesses like mine, or do you work in association with another partner? And the answer to that question, I'm going to write it down because that has a big impact on my follow-up, which we'll be addressing shortly. So number 7, really important. Step number 8, be concise and precise. Do not over exaggerate. So sometimes when you're listening to pitches, people will say, I am the best, the only, the most unique, the biggest, the smallest. But actually a lot of buyers come from markets where they're really precise about language. So if we're loose with our language like that, it can make the buyer question the integrity, and we definitely don't want that to happen. You do not need to be the best, the only, or the biggest, whatever that is, unless you really are. That's the only time to state it. Otherwise, you just present your experience with integrity, with pride. This is who I am. This is what we offer. This is the destination that we are from, inspiring the buyer to want to engage. So I would avoid over exaggerating and focusing on being, concise and polite and precise. And definitely polite. Okay. Step 9, listen. Can you imagine what it might feel like to a buyer going on 50, 60, 70, 80 appointments, 40 appointments, 20 appointments, and somebody is talking at them for each of these appointments, and they're there in their small apartment in Paris just trying to establish if there's a match. Engage in a conversation. Are you listening to what the buyer needs? Can you truly match those needs? Can I just ask you, what I've described there, do you feel it suits your customer? customers and markets? I would really love to hear that it does. So in your tone, represent your best self, your nicest self, to engage the buyer, ask questions to encourage them to be part of their conversation. If you're showing, for example, a verbal image as part of your verbal pitch, and it's a garden or something, you could be saying, I particularly like this part of the garden, and I love it because whatever flowers are here. Or what do you think of this picture? What impression does that create for you? So including the buyer in the conversation, particularly via virtual, is really important. Step 10, think local. So buyers like to understand what it means to be local, especially in a beautiful destination like Northern Ireland. So give them a local insight. You could say something like, after visiting our brewery, I would recommend that you bring your customers, this is obviously fictional, to Jimmy D's famous ice cream store. I love an ice cream myself, especially while walking along the riverbank, and I would recommend you would go there with your customers after visiting us. So bring them in under the skin of your destination by showing a lovely local insight, that's relevant to your business and location. Step 11 is really important to me. You must ask for the business. So no matter whether you're going to do 10 or 50 or 70 appointments via virtual Meet the Buyer, at each appointment, you must know if that is a yes, no, or maybe opportunity. So at some point in the conversation to be dropping in, do you think there'd be an opportunity for us to work together? I would really love that. And you would make a note if it's a yes, no, or maybe opportunity, and I'll tell you how that feeds in to the follow-up afterwards. Then I also need to ask that important word, when would you like me to follow up? So virtual Meet the Buyer, you're speaking to the buyer, you've established, you've got a great opportunity to create a partnership here. This is all going really well. You know how they contract. Can I just ask, when would suit you for me to follow up? If I were to follow up next week, next Wednesday, would that be good for you, showing respect for the buyer? You agree a follow-up date, you agree, maybe the email where you've got to send the follow-up content to, you note that in your diary, and you do as you promise. If you promise to follow up by a certain date, you follow up on the promised date, because we want the buyer to know that you are trustworthy and reliable. In light of COVID-19, I would say, apart from those questions that I might ask for the verbal pitch, there are some other questions that I would personally ask. So we're all in uncharted territories at the moment, and we're all trying to find information about how global travel is going to unfold. And I think we can clearly see from what Emer has presented this morning that there is great interest in Destination Northern Ireland based on the sheer volume of buyers that are attending, and also on the sheer number, so more than 3,000 appointments that have already been established, and still with 1 week to go. So let's just say, in light of COVID-19, I might ask a question like this. I am delighted to hear that you're interested in what we offer. Thank you so much. Now, I would want to gather more information. Can I ask if you're actively contracting for Northern Ireland? And if the answer is yes, so when do you expect your customers will travel? When do you expect to see them return? What's the feedback you are getting? Two-way conversation here. Let's just say it's a buyer that deals with lots of international markets. Which of your customers do you expect will travel first? Individuals, groups, families, from which markets? And I would make a note of the outcome of that, because it's building up information for myself and for Destination Northern Ireland of where the first opportunities are going to come from. So you're going to hear it directly from the buyers. Of course, and Emer mentioned it this morning, it's coming back very strongly in feedback that buyers also want to be reassured. They want to be reassured, their customers want to be reassured that they will be looked after, if and when they travel to Destination Northern Ireland. So while we incite, motivate, compel those buyers to book Destination Northern Ireland in your businesses via really compelling pitch, we also do need to be mindful, in light of COVID-19, that we have to address safety and anxiety concerns. So, you might say something like this: I want you to know that even if COVID-19 restrictions are in place, your customers will have a lovely time with us. As a business that has been fully certified by Tourism Northern Ireland to address wellbeing concerns in light of COVID-19, rest assured that we've got this. Your customers will have a wonderful and memorable experience within a safe environment. And of course, the We're Good to Go brand is excellent because it mops up a lot of that conversation, literally displaying to the buyer, that you have, gone through the steps that enable you to address the safety needs of their customers. And Emer was mentioning to me this morning that We're Good to Go is now a globally recognized brand. So if you are part of this, it would be really important to state it and to show it on your offline and online material. And if you want any further information about We're Good to Go, then make sure to reach out to your tourism, to your contacts in Tourism Northern Ireland. So we do want to make the customers understand, reassure them that they will be well looked after in light, of COVID-19. So that's an important step for this year. So we're coming up to the end of the session now. We've been talking about mastering the verbal pitch, really focusing on those matches. And now, and this is just, if I could put this in bright lights, I really would. The amount of people who attend, events like virtual Meet the Buyer, and, they may take the advice given today and practice really well, do a super good verbal pitch, and then establish yes, no, and maybe opportunity. So they meet 50 buyers or 30 buyers. They know which ones are most interested, which ones that said they weren't interested at all, and which ones are kind of hovering around the middle. And then afterwards, they go on and do other things and they forget to follow up. So I have a very big rule. There is no point in turning up to virtual Meet the Buyer unless you follow up. So achieving a conversion is about a lot of little steps. The buyer hearing from you through little steps, right from the appointment request, through using the messaging system, through engaging with them via, the virtual Meet the Buyer verbal pitch, through following up when you said you would. All these little steps, it's a bit like nudging a door till it's open, lead you to the conversion. So conversions don't generally happen. You'll be very lucky if it did, based on one conversation. There are multiple little conversations that create consistency and that allow you then to occupy a prominent place in the mind of the buyer, who then requests you, your business, and your destination. So during the buyer appointment, you should have already asked the buyer, if they were interested in working with you and when they would like to receive follow-up. So I'm going to put that one in bright lights. No follow-up reflects poorly on you, your business, and your destination. So big tick there. Everyone who is attending Meet the Buyer is going to follow up. Again, through our verbal pitch, we've already done the work. We've asked the question, if this is a yes, no, or maybe opportunity. So let's just say the buyer is presented with low potential or medium potential or high potential. How do we address this? Well, there's a rule that we would never close a door. So even if the buyer said, look, I'm realizing that really you're not what we're looking for, you still maintain your tone of being professional and polite. And you might follow up afterwards and, and say something like, dear Carolina, it was so lovely to meet you at Meet the Buyer. It's a pity there doesn't seem to be an opportunity to work together at present. However, let's keep in contact and perhaps an opportunity might arise sometime in the future. If I can ever assist you, please do not hesitate to let me know. So I am going to be mindful of my own reputation and Destination Northern Ireland's reputation, and I'm going to follow up even if the buyer said the potential was low with a communication like this one. Now, let's just say the potential is high. The buyer has expressed there is an opportunity to do business. Well, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to try and bring that lead to a conversion. I'm not going to leave it hanging. I'm going to stay with it until it becomes a real opportunity for my business and my destination. So what might I say there? Dear Carolina, it was lovely to meet you virtually at Meet the Buyer, and I was delighted to hear that you feel we'll soon have an opportunity to work together. I enclose our information as agreed. If you need anything further, please do not hesitate to let me know. I will call you in a couple of days to make sure you have everything. Okay, so high potential, we're going to try and bring the lead to conversion. You will also remember one of the steps I described there at the virtual pitch. I asked you to be mindful to ask the buyer how they contract. So do you contract directly with a business like mine, or do you work in partnership with another travel buyer? So let's just say the buyer says that they work, like the little graphic you're seeing here, directly with your business. Or the opposite is that the global travel buyer works in partnership with another travel buyer and then in turn with your business. So there are two very different scenarios. And you'll remember at the outset that I mentioned there that some Ireland-based travel buyers, so Ireland-based tour operators, might attend the likes of Meet the Buyer to meet partners themselves in those global markets. So a lot of international travel buyers sell in lots of different destinations, and therefore they may work with a local partner, to sell destination Northern Ireland, because that local partner will have an intimate knowledge of the destination and the suppliers. So this is a really important question for knowing how to do your follow-up, how to take your next step, and also even how to price and contract. So let's take a look at this further. If the buyer replies that they do contract directly with businesses like yours, then you need to know that to this buyer, you need to send your business information. If there's an opportunity to negotiate rates, you need to negotiate them with this buyer. So you agree your rate agreement with them directly, and you agree your terms and conditions. If the international travel buyer tells you that they work with another travel partner, then you need to ask the name of that partner. And in this case, so I will be asking the company name, and I might even say, can you tell me the name of the contact that you work with in that company? In this instance, there are two processes to the follow-up. The global buyer receives the business information, and the named travel buyer should receive the business information, the rate agreement, and the terms and conditions. In other words, if the international travel buyer is telling you that they work with another partner, it is that partner that is responsible for the rate negotiation and contracting. So that is a really important point to understand. So in terms of follow-up, what might you need? Bearing in mind that your job at Virtual Meet the Buyer is to establish a connection and to really be clear on if a match is possible between you and the travel buyer, and ultimately the potential to do business. When you get to follow up, what kind of information does the buyer like to see? Well, let's just say I'm a buyer that engages in leisure tourism and I do not engage in weddings. The last thing I want to see is a wedding brochure. So bearing in mind the target audience, the buyer wants to see information that's relevant to leisure tourism. So you may have your brochure, in a PDF format that gives an insight into your business offering from a leisure perspective. I've just pulled some examples here from Denver's Coaching Inn, some experiences that this inn offers to international travel buyers. And a travel buyer can easily see the experience catalog, if you like here, the experience, the short description, the minimum maximum numbers that apply to each, the duration and the price. So they would be really happy to receive information in this way. And this is another example from Clough Distillery. But perhaps you have not created information in this way. What you do need to bear in mind is that the information you're sending the buyer is relevant, to their target customers and markets, which will be leisure tourism. So just really think about the content that you're going to send on afterwards. For accommodation, in terms of rate negotiation, so a lot of accommodation providers tuning in today will be aware that a document like this might be used. And for tourism experiences, visitor attractions and activity providers, a rate agreement document like this might be used, where the buyer sees the public price and the associated B2B price, in other words, the price that will go to that particular buyer. So bearing in mind that if we get to go to, contracting, to doing business with the buyer, there are two parts of that contract. The first part is the rate agreement, and the second part is the terms and conditions document, which highlights things like the booking and payment and cancellation policies, things relating to, say, free places and child policies. And now, ladies and gentlemen, after a worldwide tour of virtual Meet the Buyer, I'm going to call upon Michelle of Profile Tree, who hopefully is ready with a number of questions that we will now address. Hi, Emer. Hi, Michelle.
Julie. Thank you so much, and that was so informative. So we've got a few questions coming in here, just around different aspects of the presentation. But I think you've put a lot of thoughts into people's mind and given them a little bit of homework to do. So I suppose one of the key questions would be, which markets do you think may return first?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And I suppose, like I might have said there earlier, we are in uncharted territory. So we're all trying to feel our way through this, both the supplier and the buyers. But the research that's coming through, say from Tourism Ireland, is showing, that markets nearest to us will return first. So Great Britain market will be a priority, then moving into, say, European markets like France and Germany. And that long haul is likely to come behind that. So I suppose even in terms of logic, that does make sense. So I'd watch out for that. Very important question as well, Michelle, because in establishing appointments then with buyers via virtual Meet the Buyer, you would like to establish appointments with buyers from diverse markets. So to create a spread of diverse markets, including also those ones that are likely to return first,
No, that makes perfect sense. And in terms of, obviously you've given a lot of details around that pitch, but there was a question in about how best to pitch or find the right pricing strategy. I know you've probably covered a lot around the pitch, but maybe a few tips or thoughts around that pricing strategy.
Yeah, so pricing really important when it comes to buyers, and different buyers price differently. That's a really important thing to know. So you can ask the buyer, in fact, especially if you know that there's an opportunity to do business together, how would they like their pricing? So you would normally hear a buyer from leisure tourism say two things. They would like what they call net, nothing to do with VAT, net or discounted or fixed pricing. In other words, if my public price is £10, they might be looking for a price of £7, £8 or £9, and they would put their markup onto that. Or the other kind of pricing could be commissionable pricing. In other words, if my public price is £10, they might ask me for commission of say 8 or 10% on that. So basically, different buyers have different pricing models for lots of reasons relating to how they price for their own customers, but they're the two camps that pricing tend to fall into, and it's important to ask that question. So I would bear in mind, at virtual Meet the Buyer, it is perfectly acceptable to present your retail price to the buyer, and if you are uncertain about pricing, take a bit of time to think about that, because you can manage the pricing to the buyer in your follow-up post Meet the Buyer. So at Meet the Buyer, virtual Meet the Buyer, focus on establishing a connection and a match, understanding if there is an opportunity to contract here, and then you can prepare straight after, because we're only a week away now, virtual Meet the Buyer to get your pricing in order.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense. And obviously you chatted a little bit about follow-up. How important is that follow-up?
Like it is, honestly, there's literally little point in going to virtual Meet the Buyer unless you do follow up. And as you're saying that, so when we could do these events live, I remember a general manager of a hotel telling me that his bottom drawer was full of business cards that he'd collected from virtual Meet the Buyer in previous years, and that he'd never followed up. And that would almost make me cry, because in those plastic bags or paper bags, whatever they were in, there are tons of opportunities for the business, the local destination, and destination Northern Ireland as a whole. So bear that in mind. Commercial strategies it's very important to understand that I would say it's less than 0.5% of times that you would win on the first conversation. There are lots of little multiple conversations, multiple connections, and follow-up is crucial. And I did really emphasize that word integrity, so if we are trying to make the buyer understand we are reliable and trustworthy, then we really do need to follow up to show that we are reliable and trustworthy. It's really important. Without follow-up, you will not maximize opportunities. It's crucial.
No,
hopefully everyone's heard that one loud and clear, because I'm really passionate about that. Yeah,
there was a lot of passion in that answer, Julie.
Yeah,
there, so.
exactly.
No, very, very important. And just a question around, I suppose, maybe the technical side of it. So this might be one that you might jump into, Emer, or it might be something that is outside of this conversation. But just somebody saying they're having a few challenges around using the match feature. Is there a way to maybe talk about how best to use that My Match feature? But again, that might be a technical question that's for a different platform.
Okay, the My Match function really operates on the keywords that you put into your profile. So on your networking profile, you have the option to tick a lot of boxes say what your business does, what type of service you offer, what type of accommodation you offer, and so on and so forth. So the more you fill in there, the more accurate the My Match will be. So the operators will, on the other side of the fence, will be filling in what they're looking for. So the system will then match up the operators that are maybe looking for golf courses, 4-star hotels, you know, maybe specialist experience providers. So the more information you put in there, the more accurate that My Match will actually be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
just to
it's,
come
as you say, Dawn,
yeah,
it's that's key of being specific.
Yeah, and
very much so.
Also to come on the back of that, Dawn, as well, that it's back to what Julie said about preparation. It's spending time reading through the profiles of the operators to see where there is a match. So there is a lot to be said for the hard graft initially, to make sure that you are finding operators who you can match with.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense.
And what Dawn said there about those check boxes is really important, because the matching happens a lot through that. So I'm aware of a business recently that told me they had an issue with that, but when I went into their profile, they had just ticked one box, you know, and so they were disappointed with the match. But you have to tick all the relevant boxes.
So
yeah, absolutely. Tick every box that actually applies. Very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect, great. And again, quite another quite technical question, but again, I'll ask it and you can let me know. And just someone has asked what a buyer might mean when he asks, would an allocation of one home be possible between May and September 22 with a release of 8 weeks? Can you clarify what the release of 8 weeks would mean?
Oh, that's brilliant. I really like now, you see, that people are asking. So that's what I mean about that second tip. I said knowing how to play the game. So of course, when we're learning rules as we go along as well. So it's brilliant to ask questions like that. So can I just didn't hear the word. Did they say an allocation of one room? Was it a room?
Yeah,
room.
so one home. So it must be a cottage or
a cottage.
Like
yeah,
that. So
okay.
one home with the release of 8 weeks, but between May and September 22.
Yeah, so what they mean there is, you see, the buyers are selling to multiple customers across multiple markets, and what they love to avoid doing is having to put a call every time into a business, because they're just trying to get the conversion. So what they're asking the supplier in that case is, let's just say they have 10 self-catering cottages. They're asking if one cottage could be held for their needs, for their customers and markets, and that if the cottage does not book 8 weeks before the arrival date, that they would just automatically release it. In other words, they would bring that cottage back for sale, for example, to another buyer or to the public. So every time a buyer asks a question like that, let's just say it is meet the buyer and someone asks a question like that and you're uncertain of the answer, maybe you're new to this, I would say, well, thank you so much for that opportunity. Let me have a think about that and I'll see what I can do. Okay, so and then you'll need to think about, I suppose the question I would always ask is, with the 8-week period, first of all, is this a strong partnership? So do I want to engage in this allocation? Does the buyer look likely to be able to sell this for me? And this is also a question to ask. In fact, I've heard some suppliers sometimes say to the buyer, listen, I don't want to hold it unless you feel you can sell it, okay? And if you feel that they can sell it then, and you allow the allocation, what it means is you need to be ready to be watching the sales 8 weeks out and to release that cottage back into sale through other channels like the public markets. So that is a question that does arise a lot with buyers. It's important to understand that one, and particularly when it comes to accommodation. Did I explain that, Michelle? Yeah, is that okay? Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you, Julie. And another question, and again, this might be one that's a follow-up, that would there be an example of the type of contract that a buyer would offer with a B&B? So again, that might be a sample template or something, but again, it's something to maybe just bear in mind. Would there be something available like that to support?
So contracting is, so bear in mind the different categories of tourism businesses. We said there are accommodation providers, visitor attractions, activity providers. So there are different categories of tourism businesses, and the contractual clauses might change based on the tourism business. So say, for example, the clause from an accommodation provider is likely to have some clauses that would be different from the visitor attraction. So there are a couple of things in that regard. I'm not aware of a template that is available, but There are two things. Often the buyer, in fact, I would say most cases the buyer, if they want to contract with you, you should ask them for a copy of their contract, okay? So they'll often ask for a contract for you to sign their contract. If you're put in that position, which is a lovely position because it means the buyer is interested in working with you, I would ask for a copy of that contract in Word format, and I would go through the contractual clauses, and I would make notes about any clauses that don't naturally maybe fit with my business or that I just don't understand, and I would arrange a follow-up conversation with the buyer. So the day I sign the contract, I would sign it with the full knowledge of the contractual clauses. So that's really important, bearing in mind that all the time we're talking about partnerships here, the buyer meeting the supplier in the middle. I would just bring another thought to mind, and that's that we're just trying to get the markets going again for 2022. And in the past, across the destination Ireland, people have been rigid about contractual conditions. And I'm just thinking about the businesses that I work in, and the fact that I've worked in tourism businesses in the past. For me to get 2022, back to that recovery started, I would be open, this is only my own decision, you can think about that, to offering more flexibility in 2022. And Emer, I believe that you said this morning that that's coming through in the feedback research as well. So bear in mind, the buyers and suppliers are trying to get the ball rolling here. So to answer your question, I'm not aware of a standard template, but you can ask the buyer for a sample of their contract, and you definitely objectively assess the clauses in that contract before you sign.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you very much, Julie. And just someone asking again, how best to practice their screen sharing in advance.
Do you want to jump in there,
Okay.
Dawn?
Sorry, yes, you can actually go into your agenda at any time, and you'll see beside each appointment you'll have your start video meeting now button, so you can actually start that video meeting. Obviously the operator's not going to be on the other end of that call, so you've essentially got the call to yourself, so you can practice your screen sharing in there and your presentation techniques.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dawn. And again, and just another question, just wondered about the protocol. Do we let the buyer go first, or does the seller go first?
Oh, I love that question. So I'll tell you what I always think about it like. I think about it like a waltz, okay? So it's like a dance, and the business leads the dance. That's how it works. So you very much are steering the conversation. So it's very much, hi, my name is, and you're welcoming that buyer into your world. But like in a dance, you're not standing on someone else's feet, or you're not trying to get them to topple over. You're very respectful, okay? So no, very much, and that's a really important thing to understand. The tourism business, the control is really in their hands, and they lead it. And I will say this for people who are still on for the questions: you can literally change a mindset. You present well, you present the destination well, you do a good verbal pitch, you're mindful not to overwhelm, you're professional and friendly, you're smiling and engaging. You can literally change the mindset of the buyer to want them to engage with you and your destination, and that's an amazing power to know. So you very much are in a waltz where you are leading the dance. And no hiding on that, because the moment you start giving the control over the buyer, you're not going to maximize the potential for a conversion. So sometimes when people are nervous, they do that. And actually, on the back of that, if we could say, Michelle, because maybe there are people listening in today who are new, and let's just say they go on now, hopefully you've got all the technology, so Dawn is not going to get those calls this year, you've all of that stuff practiced, but you go on to your first appointment, and actually you've done loads of practice, but you've just got so nervous you feel you didn't do a great job, okay? Then you don't beat yourself up over that. You just go on to your next appointment, pick yourself up, and aim to convert that one. That's what learning is about. So,
No, that's great advice, Julie. And I think that's gives people a good insight into, I suppose, how they should be approaching it, and that thought process, and back to what Emer's saying, all that preparation beforehand and getting yourself just in the zone, and having that thought process, and having that all sorted out in your mind before you actually get on to that call. A couple of more questions, and then we'll let you escape, Julie. So I have more experiences than I actually have on my website, but don't want to overwhelm those checking my website. Should I set those up to send the information on those separately?
I have more experiences than feature on my website. In other words,
Yes.
they have more. Oh gosh, I'd be making the buyer aware of all the, particularly in the follow-up. So through the virtual pitch appointment, I'd be making them aware of the essence, so what the business has, the kind of experiences that it offers. But in the follow-up, no, I would send them the suite. So it's a bit like your market stall. You're showing them exactly what you have available for sale here. I would caution against one thing. Let's just say you have a lot of experiences, like 15, 20, 22. Try and categorize them in so that the buyer can easily read them. So it's hard to read a long list of 2022. So if you can kind of, categorize them into, say, general experiences, premium experiences, or, 1 hour experiences versus 4 hour experiences to make for easy reading. I would think about it exactly like a retail shelf in a store, how people work hard to make sure that things are easily seen. So yeah, no, but you want to achieve, you want to show them what you have available for sale. Yeah.
Okay, and then a really interesting question here. If a buyer is coming from a new market or location and you don't speak their language, or they need guides in their language, how would you advise we respond or engage with these interview requests?
Okay, so that's one of my favorite questions, because I would really love, and I would urge people who are just, booking appointments with English-speaking markets to think beyond that. So for example, the French, the Germans, they have huge amount, really big markets, the Italians for Ireland, and really want Spanish, really want to engage with this destination, and will really be interested in hearing about the opportunities in Northern Ireland. You will sometimes find a buyer that doesn't have a good handle on English. So your job is actually probably to say less and to slow down and to establish a connection. Let's just say, and that does arise, and actually you're making me think as you say that, Michelle. I remember working with an adventure provider that just offered experiences in English because that was their language, and they didn't have any other language. And the French buyers, some of the French buyers, were interested in working with them, but were disappointed that they didn't have a French language adventure guide. So what they did was they sold their experience at the normal price and then advised the French buyer. They found someone locally who could actually act like a guide or interpreter and advise the French guide of the supplement for that. And that is a really brilliant solution, because I suppose it answers the buyer's query, and it then gives the buyer to opt in or not, to that, but it means you've provided the buyer with a solution. So I'm going to ask everyone listening in today, and anyone listening to the recording, really reach out to non-English speaking markets. You can carve amazing opportunity from those. You just need to be mindful, to slow down and to address their language needs. And you can use tools like I've just described to find solutions for them. I would also bear in mind that people from North America also say, by the way, that we speak fast, and even if they are English speakers themselves, they find it hard to keep up. So that tip doesn't apply just to the French speaker, it applies to English speakers too, Sometimes we can have just different accents. We need to slow down a little so that they understand,
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Julie. And just one last question, unless anybody, if you've got any last questions, do pop them into the chat now. But I suppose if you do get an inquiry, how quickly should you respond?
Okay, this one's easy for me because I started off my career as a buyer and then I went into tourism businesses. So when you're a buyer, you need to know that when you get a proposal from your customer, the international markets, your job is to reply on the day or within 24 hours. So like Northern Ireland, in this proposal could be competing against, Spain or the Caribbean, could be anywhere else in the world. And the market that comes back latest is the one that's least likely to be included. So it is most important that you get into the habit of replying on the day or within 24 hours. And let's just say something's been asked that you need to check out, then don't leave the buyer in outer space. Reply back, dear John, thank you so much for the inquiry. You've asked for A. Be aware that I have not forgotten you. I'm just checking this out, and I will be back by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So you're not leaving them hanging out there, you're minding them. Really important. So I would really urge people with that one, because actually, if you know how to reply efficiently, thoroughly on the day within brief responses, bullet pointed responses that are clear to the buyer, you will really increase the opportunity for conversions. Yeah, and imagine then, Michelle, you've gone to virtual meet the buyer, you've practiced your pitch, you've done the technology prep, you've done the follow-up, and the day you get the inquiry is the day you really need to get it across the line. So please activate that one. That's really important. Yeah, don't not reply.
Brilliant. And this is the last question, unless there's any other questions coming in. Just what advice would you have around cancellation policies?
Yeah, so cancellation policy. So again, depending on the business, diverse cancellation policies, but the buyers are very much asking for some flexibility around policies for 2022. So, you know, before you might have been doing policies like I do, you pay a deposit as soon as you confirm, and then you pay the balance, whatever that is, 30, 14 days out. Just with the uncertainty of the world at the moment, you know, they would like a bit more flexibility. So look, I can just say that as a tourism business interested in establishing partnerships with buyers, mutually beneficial partnerships, I would be interested to get the recovery going from 2022. That would be my own decision in facilitating more flexible cancellation policies. That said, if I were to go out with a policy that is more flexible for 2022, I would put a note with it that says, Dear John, in light of COVID-19, and because we want to encourage business, you know, for 2022, we're going to provide this, you know, payment and cancellation policy. I reserve the right to address this again in 2023. So you're informing the buyer that this is for an interim period until, to really support the recovery. And then you've teed it up that you can address those contractual conditions for the new year in 2023 again.
Sorry, Julian, I did say that was the last question, but there are two little sneaky ones that have just dropped in,
No,
if that's okay, just at the end. So is it possible to have or see a copy of the rate agreement suitable for self-catering accommodation that Julie showed during her presentation?
Yeah, I can send a copy of that. I can send a copy of that. So that's just a sample, okay? So I'll send a copy of that people can look at, yeah. And you'll see that different buyers come with their own format for accommodation, but it'll give you an idea of the kind of format. Yeah, no problem.
And can you show short videos during the meetings?
Now, I was waiting for this question because this does come up, okay? So I need to say this as a buyer, or you know, someone who's listened to literally thousands of presentations. I have only once in my career seen someone use a video well, okay, during a verbal pitch. And why did they use it well? Because they actually brought me through the streets. They used the video to explain the experience. What I most often see people doing with video is they press play, and then there's this, think about it, we're doing a dance here, we're doing the waltz, and then the buyer is left like literally just looking at a video and there's no further conversation. I find it's used by people who can maybe feel a bit nervous about conducting the verbal pitch as well. So you just bear in mind, if you're going to press a video and, you know, if it lasts longer than 30 seconds, and even 30 seconds is a long time on virtual, watch the face of the buyer to make sure that you're drawing them in to showing them the relevancy of this video. And please do not make the videos long. So bear that in mind, you know, make the decision, whatever you're comfortable with. But in my whole career, I've only seen someone do that well once. Dawn, do you have any feedback on that?
I mean, absolutely, there is the functionality there to show videos, but very much I would agree with Judy that, you know, you want to try and keep the buyer's attention. So, you know, they're there to meet you. And whilst you can maybe send your videos on afterwards, or, you know, you can attach them to your profile for them to view at any time, I would try and keep the meetings very much face-to-face if possible.
Yeah, no, very much about the connection. Like it's the buyer is really interested in, you know, sometimes I see people show up and they said, I spent a lot of money on this marketing material. The buyer is interested in you. You know, they're interested in your business offering and the experiences you have for sale, your destination, your community and destination, Northern Ireland. That's what they're trying to figure out. Is there a match here or not? So actually a lovely thing to know about this world is often you don't have to invest in the very expensive marketing, because actually it's all about you. They're trying to, you know, offer to their customers and markets experiences that bring them in, you know, under the skin of what it means, you know, to live in Northern Ireland and in this, you know, in these communities. So it's beautiful. These are experiences, all about people, you know. Yeah, so I say video, yeah, no problem, but use it with caution and use it if you feel comfortable with it. So going back to Dawn's point, I would definitely be practicing that one with the technology if I'm opting to use video.
No,
Any more
really,
sneaky
really
ones,
useful.
Michelle?
Yeah, and no, there was there is one last.
Okay.
This is the last one. It's a very easy one. Plain background or a photo in the background, Julie? What do you think?
So actually through Converve, you screen share your visual. So where am I going to present from? You mean, is it?
Yeah, so just what background should we have online when we chat? So I suppose it's something clean and plain, or is it maybe like a virtual background with a photo on it, or what do you think?
Okay, so through Converve, you can't use a virtual background actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's important to know. You can screen share your images, but you cannot use a virtual background. So I would say this, what you want, do you know the way sometimes you're having conversations with people and you're like, oh, that's an interesting fridge magnet now behind them. And, you know, that's an interesting potted plant up on the shelf there. We want to get the conversion. So if the buyer is being distracted by the background, that might just not lead us to a conversion. So I would say if you're working from home, try and get as plain a background as possible. That's not going to distract. And actually, I am mindful that I saw someone doing a verbal pitch recently using Converve, and they had placed themselves in front of an open window with a garden behind them. And in light of the world we're currently living in, they did an amazing job. I felt like just leaping through Converve and jumping out their window and getting into that garden. So if you're in a position to do that within your business, I would definitely show that. And imagine the impression that would make for the buyer in Paris or Stockholm when you're saying, look at this amazing mountain behind me, or look at this river view, and you know, and you're actually drawing their attention to what's behind them. And sometimes you see within visitor, like I saw one recently done within a visitor attraction where they placed themselves inside the exhibition, then they actually walked and showed me a beautiful mosaic window with their car, and I thought, oh, this guy's doing great here, I'm in his arms. Do you see that? So maybe on the last note, there is nothing a buyer loves more than meeting a person who has immense integrity, who knows how to do this well. They love being in the arms of the person delivering the verbal pitch. They love it. You know, they love when that personality comes across. I mean, I know I loved it as a buyer, and you remember the jewels who really showed who they were, brought out their best self. It's just a lovely experience. So do bear that in mind when you are practicing, yeah. And if you can put yourself in front of a lovely view that shows the destination, I would definitely recommend that, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And that's been really, really insightful. I think we've all got a little bit of homework to do now. Emer, I'll pass over to you if you've any closing remarks, or Dawn. But I think that was really useful, Julie. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michelle, for expertly guiding us through all those amazing questions from all the participants. Shows everybody was absolutely listening, very careful and thinking about how that's going to translate into next week. So just from my end, just to wrap up, I know we've completely gone over time, but there was fantastic questions there, and I think that was a very useful session. A huge thanks to Julie for a very informative session. There is no doubt that we can all be fully prepared now for next week for our dance routine and our waltzes and our tangos or whatever we need to do next week. And just to reiterate the importance of the preparation and of the follow-up, and you know, Meet the Buyer is not a one-off transaction. We are here to build long-term beneficial relationships, and with these overseas operators that will see a very strong recovery for tourism in Northern Ireland in future years. So it's very much about continuing that follow-up, continuing the conversations. So huge thanks to Julie, huge thanks to Michelle, in particular a huge thanks to my colleagues Dawn and all the Business Solutions team who have put in exceptional amount of work bringing together this virtual Meet the Buyer for everybody. Big thanks to Barry from Eventful in the background who made sure all the technology worked and everything went as it should be. And most of all, thank you to everybody out there for your attendance this morning, and also your continued support in attending all these platforms and putting your best foot forward. And we are really buoyed by the fantastic experiences and our very positive industry that are out there to see us through these challenging times and into a more positive recovery period. So I wish you all the very best for next week, and we really look forward to hearing how it's all gone after the event. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Best of luck, everyone.